They had conquered 17 star systems in less than a decade. Their massive warships darkened the skies of countless worlds. Their soldiers numbered in the billions. Every species they encountered either surrendered or died. The galaxy had learned a simple truth: resistance against them meant extinction. When their fleet arrived at the edge of Terran space, the alien commanders expected another easy victory. Humans were young to the stars. They had only colonized a handful of worlds. Their technology was primitive compared to the great empires that had already fallen. The High Command estimated the war would last 3 months at most. They were wrong. The first sign of trouble came on a small moon called Vega 7. It was a mining colony with no strategic importance. They sent a ground force of 40,000 soldiers to secure it. They expected to find scared civilians and a handful of security guards. Instead, they found Sergeant. Was not supposed to be on Vega 7. His transport ship had suffered engine failure during a routine supply run. He crash-landed on the moon just 2 hours before they arrived. The civilian population of 3,000 had no weapons, no defenses, and no hope of rescue. The nearest Terran military base was 6 days away. The alien descended through the thin atmosphere like metal locusts, watched them from the roof of the colony's main building. He counted the ships. He calculated the enemy numbers. The math was simple. He was one man against an army. Any reasonable soldier would have hidden. Any reasonable soldier would have waited for the aliens to take what they wanted and leave, but had spent 15 years fighting in the Terran military. He had seen what they did to populations that surrendered. He had seen the mass graves on 4. He had seen the slave camps on the moons of. He made his decision in less than a minute. The colony's mining facility had explosives for breaking rock, gathered every charge he could find. The maintenance bay had fuel cells and chemical tanks. He took those too. The security office had 3 old rifles and a few hundred rounds of ammunition. Strapped them to his back. They landed their first wave of troops in the valley below the colony. Their commander, a tall creature named, organized his soldiers with the confidence of someone who had never lost a battle. He sent scouts ahead to assess the colony's defenses. None of the scouts came back. Had positioned himself in the narrow canyon that served as the only ground approach to the colony. The walls were 50 meters high. The path was barely wide enough for 4 soldiers to walk side by side. It was a natural and turned it into a killing field. He had rigged the canyon walls with mining charges. When the first column of soldiers entered, he detonated them all. The explosion brought down half the cliff. 200 alien soldiers were buried under tons of rock in seconds. Was surprised but not concerned. He had 39,000 more soldiers. He ordered a second assault, this time with air support. Had anticipated this. He had spent 2 hours studying the colony's old weather station data. He knew that in exactly 12 minutes, a massive dust storm would sweep through the valley. Visibility would drop to 0. The aircraft would be useless. He retreated to the colony, set new traps and waited. The storm arrived exactly on time. Through the swirling dust could hear the soldiers advancing. They moved slowly, unable to see more than a few feet ahead. They relied on their helmet sensors to navigate. Had learned something important during his years of service. Sensors used thermal imaging. They tracked body heat. Had spent the last hour running through the colony, touching walls, handling equipment, leaving his heat signature everywhere. The sensors showed hundreds of targets scattered throughout the buildings. Their soldiers split up, hunting ghosts while the real threat moved silently among them. Killed 47 soldiers during that storm. He used the old rifles until they ran out of ammunition. Then he used knives. Then he used his bare hands. The aliens had never fought an enemy that moved through darkness like a shadow. They had never faced a predator that showed no fear. By the time the storm passed, had lost over 300 soldiers. His officers were becoming nervous. They had expected to secure the colony in an hour. 6 hours had passed, and they had not even reached the main buildings. The commander made a decision that would later be studied in military academies across the galaxy. He ordered a full assault. Every soldier, every vehicle, every weapon. They would overwhelm the colony with sheer numbers. Had planned for this too. The colony's power plant ran on hydrogen fuel cells. Had spent the quiet moments between battles draining those cells and spreading the hydrogen gas through the underground tunnels. The tunnels connected every building in the colony. When the forces moved in, sealed the tunnel entrances and ignited the gas. The explosion was visible from orbit. 7,000 soldiers died in that single blast. The shockwave knocked off his feet. For the first time in his military career, the alien commander felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. Was wounded in the explosion. A piece of metal had torn through his left arm. He was bleeding badly. His vision was starting to blur. But the civilians were still hiding in the emergency bunker beneath the colony. If he stopped fighting, they would die. He wrapped his arm with torn cloth and kept moving. The battle continued for 2 more days. Used every trick he knew. He collapsed buildings on advancing troops. He poisoned water supplies. He sent false signals to confuse enemy communications. He turned the entire colony into a maze of death. Threw everything he had at one human soldier. He used artillery. He used chemical weapons. He used soldiers specifically trained for urban combat. Nothing worked. Every attack was predicted. Every advance was stopped. The alien army was slowly being destroyed by a single man. On the 3rd day, something changed. Captured a Terran communication device from one of his abandoned positions. He listened to the human frequencies, hopping to learn about enemy movements. Instead, he heard something that made his blood run cold. Other Terran colonies were broadcasting about Vega 7. They were calling a hero. They were sharing his tactics. Civilians on a dozen worlds were studying what one soldier had accomplished with mining explosives and old rifles. They had controlled the narrative of every war they fought. They made conquered species believe resistance was impossible. But now, the story of Vega 7 was spreading. Humans everywhere were learning that they could be hurt. They could be defeated. They could die. Understood the danger. Was no longer just a soldier. He was a symbol. If he survived, if the story of Vega 7 reached every Terran world, the war would change completely. The humans would fight back. They would never surrender. The alien commander made his final decision. He pulled his remaining forces back from the colony. He ordered his fleet to bombard Vega 7 from orbit. If he could not kill on the ground, he would turn the entire moon into a crater. But had underestimated human technology. The colony's emergency bunker had been built to survive asteroid impacts. When the bombardment ended, the bunker was still intact. 3,000 civilians emerged from the ruins, alive and unharmed. Was not as lucky. The bombardment had caught him in the open. He had been trying to draw fire away from the bunker entrance when the first plasma rounds hit. His body was never found. But his legend was just beginning. The Terran military arrived 6 days later. They found a moon covered in wreckage and corpses. They found civilians who told stories of a soldier who fought like a demon. They counted the enemy dead, 18,000 soldiers killed by one man. The news spread across human space like wildfire. Vega 7 became a rallying cry. Remember was painted on warships and carved into weapons. Terran soldiers who had been afraid of the now faced them with new determination. The war that the aliens had expected to win in 3 months lasted 12 years. They won many battles. They captured several Terran worlds, but they never broke human resistance. On every planet, in every city, soldiers and civilians remembered what one man had accomplished on a forgotten mining moon. In the end, they sued for peace. Their empire was exhausted. Their fleet was decimated. They had lost millions of soldiers trying to conquer a species that refused to stop fighting. The treaty they signed gave back every world they had taken. They retreated to their own territory and never threatened Terran space again. Historians would later argue about the turning point of the war. Some pointed to the great naval battles. Others mentioned the political alliances humans formed with other species. But most agreed that the real change happened on Vega 7. One soldier had shown the galaxy what humans were capable of. One man had refused to accept impossible odds. One Terran had looked at an alien army and decided to fight anyway. That decision changed everything. A statue of Now stands in the center of New Geneva, the capital of the Terran Federation. It shows a tired soldier holding an old rifle, looking toward the stars. At the base of the statue, a simple inscription reads, "He taught us that we could win." They have a statue too. In their war museum, they keep a hologram of space. Young officers are brought to see it as part of their training. Their instructors tell them to remember this human, to study his tactics, to understand what made him dangerous. But the lesson is not about tactics. The lesson is about will. They learned something on Vega 7 that changed how they viewed the universe. They learned that some species cannot be conquered by force alone. They learned that the strength of a civilization is not measured in ships or soldiers or technology. It is measured in the hearts of those who refuse to surrender. And on that forgotten mining moon, in a battle that should have been a footnote in history, one Terran soldier showed the galaxy what human hearts were made of. The war began on Vega 7. The legend began with, and the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again.